Hey everybody, welcome to Travis on Sports, the podcast where I give my thoughts on the latest sports news. I'm Travis Tyler, freelance sports writer and aspiring sports media personality. Today is Wednesday, July 6th, 2022. We'll be talking Kevin Durant, NBA free agency, and a couple NBA trades, the latest NHL coaching hires, some updates on Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield. We'll get into some of the NCAA college football and I guess basketball is affected and all other sports will be affected by the conference expansion and realignment. ESPN has released their college football playoff odds, so I'll talk about that a little bit. And something I noticed about the 4th of July this year was a lack of national baseball broadcast. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, just get something off my chest. So let's just get into it all right now. Kevin Durant has requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets and provided a list of teams that he would prefer to join. Unlike Kyrie Irving's list, this list is pretty exclusive and it just includes the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns. Many analysts have pointed out that the Suns are the most realistic fit for the two because they have the young players to deal for him and the young assets to deal for him, but would they be willing to part with the likes of DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges and any of the other younger players on that roster to get the deal done? We don't know that yet, but I think they should make the deal because while you're giving away some assets that make your team very, very deep and very dangerous for years to come, you've entered that portion where you're ready to win now and bring in superior talent. And you already have that with Devin Booker there, and if you bring in Durant to play alongside him, that could be one of the best tandems in the league, probably the best tandem in the league, and would be extremely hard to stop. And it's a win for the Nets, too, because they'll be able to add some young pieces to build around with the rebuild, and plus it would be monumental number of first-round picks going back the other way as well. The Nets trading a player of Durant's caliber, one of the best to ever play in the NBA, and still mostly in his prime and still able to play at a high level, will want a king's ransom. We're basically going to see the biggest haul that anyone's ever gotten for one player in NBA history. And he's on a mission to win a championship, and teams know that, so it's going to be win-now teams going after him. Miami and Phoenix obviously being the preferred destinations because they've been close in recent years, and he has relationships with guys on those teams. There are also rumors that the Warriors are interested in a reunion, but the deal that I heard could be on the table for that, and I don't know how accurate the report of their interest is, but basically they'd be mortgaging all their future star players and shrinking what is already a really small championship window that's probably open for another 3 or 4 years down to maybe another 2 years, and forcing themselves to have an even harder rebuild when they've already got some pieces there that could be part of the next wave of their team. So I wouldn't do that if I'm the Warriors. Also in the NBA, free agency started last week, and there have been some significant deals already. Marvin Bagley III is returning to the Detroit Pistons on a 3-year, $37 million contract. Played much better for them after being traded by the Kings at last year's deadline. Thaddeus Young goes back to Toronto. Gary Harris goes back to Orlando. The Golden State bench loses a couple players, with Damian Lee going to Phoenix and Gary Payton II going to the Portland Trailblazers. The Lakers have brought in Troy Brown Jr. and Juan Toscano-Anderson, so there's another person from the bench lineup in the second team for the Warriors in Toscano-Anderson. Josh Okogie, a former first-round pick, goes to the Phoenix Suns. That's a nice little depth wing piece there. Phoenix is also keeping Bismack Biyombo as a backup big man there. May even slide into the starting lineup depending on how the trades work out. Aaron Holiday, decent NBA point guard, goes to the Hawks. Good thing for him there is he's probably not going to be relied on to be a starter there with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, but he could be a solid player off the bench there for them at the point guard spot. JaMychal Green, the power forward, goes to Oklahoma City. Daniil House goes to Philadelphia. Malik Monk, the shooting guard, former lottery pick, is reunited with his former college teammate De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. PJ Tucker goes to Philly. That's a pretty big signing there with James Harden and Embiid and whoever else they're trying to get in there. Their big thing this year was once they got Harden off that contract and were about to sign him to a different deal was to get wing help in there, and that's certainly something that Tucker provides. Lonnie Walker IV, who broke into the league with the Spurs, is headed to the Lakers, who need that infusion of young talent behind LeBron. And, Anthony Davis isn't old, but a lot of their team is just older veterans that need those guys in there to facilitate the next wave of Lakers players. Veteran guard DeLon Wright goes to the Washington Wizards, who are also keeping Bradley Beal after he opted out of his player option. Gets a 5-year, $251 million contract with a full no-trade clause. James Harden will be re-signing with the Philadelphia 76ers, but the terms have not been disclosed, and from what I gather, have not been completely agreed to yet, but it's expected to happen. A couple trades. The Jazz trade Royce O'Neal, the forward, basically, I believe he's mostly a sixth man for them from what I've seen of the Jazz, to the Brooklyn Nets for a 2023 first-round pick. The Hawks trade guard Kevin Huerter, who we talked about last week when we were talking about the DeJounte Murray trade and how that could make Huerter expendable, and turns out it was. He goes to the Kings for a couple of wings in Justin Holiday and Mo Harkless and a first-round pick. The big one was the Jazz again trading All-Star center Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a massive haul that included guards Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Leandro Bolomar, just drafted big man Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, and 4 first-round picks, plus another pick swap there. So the T-Wolves, fresh off winning their way into the bubble and giving Memphis a challenge in the first round of the playoffs, chip off a few guys that were part of the rotation, and we'll be going with the more traditional 2 big man look with Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns around Anthony Edwards and the other guys that they have there. A few more coaching hires were made in the NHL this week. The Detroit Red Wings have hired Tampa Bay assistant Derek Lalonde. People keep saying Lalonde, but I've heard it's pronounced Lalonde. He has a history of success at every level. He's coached at college, the ECHL, the AHL. He's been an assistant for Tampa, where he's won 2 Stanley Cups. That certainly brings some clout there. And it's the second time that Steve Yzerman has hired him to a coaching position in the franchise that he's running. So clearly, while there are some frightening similarities to Jeff Blashill, who was just let go by the Red Wings, Yzerman's built up the trustworthiness of his plans as a GM over the years, and with his familiarity with Lalonde, he should be able to put together a team that fits what they want to do. And I would assume at this point those guys have similar visions for where that team's going to go. The Winnipeg Jets have hired Rick Bowness, who just left the Stars after a playoff run with his staff. He was extremely successful in Dallas and even took them to a Stanley Cup Finals appearance during the COVID. And now he joins another team that is kind of in the same situation that Dallas was when he took over, which was barely getting in the playoffs or barely missing the playoffs, and somewhat improving from year to year, but just never really being able to get over that hump. Winnipeg this past season missed the playoffs for the first time since they moved back to Winnipeg from Atlanta, although the original Jets franchise actually turned into the Coyotes, and the Thrashers just took the name back when they moved to Winnipeg. But they missed the playoffs this year for the first time since moving back to Winnipeg, and were right in that spot where they were just shy of the playoffs, and it's a very familiar spot for where Bowness has coached teams up from before. And so that fit certainly makes sense there. I was surprised that he left the Stars, but Winnipeg, I think, did a good job finding their coach there. The Boston Bruins have hired another former Stars head coach in Jim Montgomery. He's also coached at the college level and been an assistant in other places. The Bruins are another team looking to win now. Under Bruce Cassidy last year, they got the last spot in the playoffs. They went to the playoffs every year under Cassidy, but this time they were bounced in the first round of the playoffs. They're looking for somebody to get them over that hump too, not to overuse that expression, but it is what it is. Montgomery is a younger coach with NHL experience. He led the Stars to 1 playoff appearance in 3 years, but there's one thing that concerns me about his time in Dallas is he was fired for unprofessional conduct that went against team values and reportedly clashed with the executives upon his departure. So we'll see if that becomes a problem in Boston or if he's able to make it work. In the NFL, earlier today, the Browns traded quarterback Baker Mayfield to Carolina in exchange for a conditional 2024 draft pick. Despite the trade, the Panthers are reportedly welcoming a quarterback competition between Mayfield and Sam Darnold, who was last year's starter and a former first-round pick himself, and they will not be looking to trade Darnold. Now, the Panthers and the Seahawks had been rumored to be the most likely destinations for Mayfield, basically since the Browns made the trade for Deshaun Watson and Mayfield's first choice, the Indianapolis Colts, traded for veteran Matt Ryan. As I said before, I felt like neither one of them were a great fit for him personally, but he improved the position for both of them and would have been the starter wherever he went. He goes to Carolina, should be the starter there. Seattle, from what everyone's reported since it happened, would only have been interested in Mayfield if he had been released. He was not released. Carolina makes the trade. In terms of this quarterback competition, like I said, I expect Mayfield to be the starter wherever he ended up, and I find it really hard to believe that it's a true competition because Mayfield is the better quarterback. He's had the better NFL career, and to me, he wins this job easily. Now, I do believe that they're going to be keeping Sam Darnold, but the only reason I see that happening is not because they don't want to trade him, but because there is no market for them. If he doesn't win this job, he'll have filled out as an NFL starting quarterback twice, making him more of a backup going forward. Teams aren't going to be willing to trade as much for that. But also, the quarterback trade market this offseason, or at least since the draft, has been Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo. Which one of them, if not both or neither of them, is going to be the next one traded? What do they get for them? Where do they go? Where are their potential fits and destinations? The reason it took so long for Mayfield to get traded wasn't just because of his contract. It was because there aren't a lot of destinations out there for quarterbacks to go, and there's not a lot of demand from teams trying to trade for quarterbacks, probably because they don't think the ones available are that much better than the ones that they have on their rosters. So we finally saw Mayfield go today. Jimmy Garoppolo's got to be the next domino to fall, if it ever falls this offseason. And then there's really no reason to believe the team is going to be interested in Darnold until some kind of injury happens, so he's at least going to be on Carolina's team. I guess they could release him after training camp and go with someone else as a backup, but my point is there's not really a trade market for Sam Darnold's services, especially with Jimmy Garoppolo still available. Now, Baker is entering his fifth season and only has one winning season and is 1-1 in the playoffs, so I guess you can't hand him the job. He's definitely not that quarterback that's going to automatically make you a winner, but to me, he is an above-average NFL quarterback. Instant improvement in Carolina. This trade, remember you got the Deshaun Watson case pending and the league punishment pending, so you don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson this year. It's highly likely that he's going to be suspended for the year, if not longer, and that would leave Cleveland with Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback with Josh Dobbs as their top backup option. Speaking of Watson, we're getting closer to a decision on the civil hearings regarding his alleged sexual misconduct while he was a member of the Houston Texans. The judge in that case is expected to deliver a ruling within the next week or so. He is also still under investigation by the league and probably faces additional discipline there from the league, and it could even be harsher discipline from the league than from the court or vice versa. College sports world experienced a major shakeup last week when it was rocked with the announcement that UCLA and USC will be joining the Big Ten in 2024. Shortly after the announcement, it was revealed that Washington and Oregon have also apparently applied for Big Ten membership. That happened later that day, and they were apparently told that the conference is holding off for now and waiting to see what happens with Notre Dame. Plenty more rumors have continued to swirl since then. There's a report that the ACC and the Pac-12 are discussing a loose partnership that a lot of details haven't come out on yet, but it includes a potential championship game between the two conferences in Las Vegas, and it's part of trying to survive and add value to the media rights negotiation for the Pac-12 that's going on right now. Like I said, there's not much else known. We've seen these alliances be formed before. You had a similar thing with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the ACC just a few months ago, quickly broken by the Big Ten poaching a couple Pac-12 members and maybe even more on the way. They can try it as just a temporary fix because at some point one of those bigger conferences is going to come knocking for some of those other teams, and you're just not going to have enough teams to be able to have a formidable partnership between the conferences or even